We need a whole new way to function in the world if humanity is going to continue as a species. If anybody cares about that, and I certainly do.
Graham Hancock just made a connection that nobody saw coming. The Ark of the Covenant and UFOs, two mysteries separated by thousands of years, now linked in a way that raises more questions than answers.
It's a genuine mystery. For this thing to have been built in 23 years seems to me pretty...
It's a long time.
Hancock reveals a thread that ties ancient temple builders, astronomical alignments, and vehicles for entering other realms together.
But the question is, what inspired that? And I think it was experiences in altered states of consciousness.
This isn't about ancient aliens building pyramids. This is about something far more mysterious.
I've devoted a huge chunk of my now 74-year-old life to following this mystery, and it's mystery that draws me into it.
Something that might explain why civilizations across the globe built temples pointing to the same stars, told the same stories, and guarded the same secrets. What Hancock uncovered about the Ark of the Covenant and its connection to UFOs will leave you questioning everything. The vehicles between worlds. Graham Hancock sits across from his interviewer, his eyes carrying the weight of knowledge that most people spend lifetimes avoiding. When the conversation turns to UFOs, he doesn't dismiss them. Instead, he references something unexpected: his relationship with Pablo Amaringo, a Peruvian shaman whose paintings depict flying saucers alongside spiritual visions. I asked Pablo specifically why he is painting UFOs in his work, Graham Hancock explains. Flying saucers, literally. And I said, "Are you telling us that beings from other planets are visiting us? What are these flying saucers that you're depicting?" Pablo's response cuts through decades of either-or thinking about the UFO phenomenon. Oh well, those are vehicles for entering and leaving the spirit world. This wasn't just metaphorical language. Pablo Amaringo, who had dedicated his life to exploring consciousness through traditional plant medicines, saw no contradiction between the physical and the spiritual. For him, UFOs represented technology capable of bridging realities that modern science barely acknowledges exist. But Graham Hancock doesn't stop at Pablo's explanation. Instead, he leans into the possibility it suggests that what we call technology and what shamans call spirit vehicles might be two expressions of the same underlying mechanism. If Pablo's flying saucers are tools for crossing into other realms, then perhaps ancient cultures also possessed, or encountered, devices that operated on similar principles, objects capable of bridging the physical and the invisible. And suddenly, the notion of ancient artifacts behaving like advanced technology doesn't seem so far-fetched. And here's where the interview moves onto a topic few would have guessed could ever be tied to UFOs: the Ark of the Covenant. The connection becomes clearer when you examine the characteristics attributed to both phenomena. Witnesses describe UFOs as defying known physics, appearing and disappearing instantaneously, affecting electronic equipment, and emanating unusual radiation. Historical accounts of the Ark of the Covenant describe strikingly similar phenomena: the power to strike people dead who touched it improperly, its ability to level walls, and the strict protocols required for its transport. This isn't about aliens building the pyramids, or ancient astronauts handing technology to primitive humans. What Graham Hancock proposes is far more nuanced and, frankly, more unsettling. He's suggesting that certain objects, certain places, and certain practices allowed ancient civilizations to interact with intelligences that exist outside our normal perception of reality. And the scariest part? His evidence might be too compelling to ignore. The portal hypothesis. When Graham Hancock examines ancient structures, he sees patterns that mainstream archaeology ignores. These aren't just buildings. They're machines designed with specific astronomical alignments that seem to serve a purpose beyond decoration or calendars. You have King Gudea of Sumeria saying that in a dream he was given this lapis lazuli, these tablets, saying that he has to build a temple with these specific astronomical alignments, Hancock notes. You see the same thing with Pharaoh Thutmose in Egypt. You see the same thing with Aztec leaders, with Nebuchadnezzar. This pattern repeats across cultures that supposedly never came into contact with each other. Leaders receive divine instructions, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in visions, to build temples with precise celestial orientations. Graham Hancock sees this as evidence of ascension portals. The concept sounds like science fiction until you examine the specifics. These structures consistently align with Orion's belt, the Pleiades, and other stellar landmarks. Even Ptolemy, writing in 100 AD during the Roman period, documented that the soul's ascension path goes through Orion's belt. From there, you're on the Milky Way. Then you make your journey, Graham Hancock explains, describing ancient beliefs about the afterlife path. But here's where the Ark of the Covenant enters the picture. The Ark wasn't just a container for sacred tablets. It was built according to extremely specific instructions given directly by divine command. The materials, the dimensions, the gold overlay, the mercy seat on top, the cherubim facing each other, every detail mattered. Why? What made this particular configuration so critical? Graham Hancock's research into radioactive materials at ancient sites provides a clue. You can think of the Ark of the Covenant as maybe a product of the same thing, he says, referring to the presence of uranium and other radioactive substances at locations associated with spiritual activity. The Skinwalker Ranch phenomenon, a location famous for UFO sightings and paranormal activity, shows elevated radiation levels. Ancient curse sites, including King Tut's tomb, show similar signatures. Investigative journalist Robert Hastings documented how UFOs consistently appear around nuclear facilities. There's a pattern here, connecting radiation, portals, consciousness, and non-human intelligence. The Ark of the Covenant, according to this hypothesis, wasn't just symbolically powerful. It was technologically active, operating on principles that linked physical materials with consciousness and interdimensional access. And if it truly functioned as such a device, it would need protection, not from human armies, but from forces that understood its true nature. The consciousness connection. Graham Hancock's work with ayahuasca and DMT provides another piece of this puzzle. Modern research at Imperial College London and the University of California, San Diego, has begun mapping what happens when human consciousness enters these altered states for extended periods. Scientists discovered they can use intravenous DMT to keep volunteers in peak altered states for an hour or longer. Unlike other psychedelics, DMT doesn't build tolerance. You can just keep taking it every day, and you will not build up tolerance to it, Hancock explains. The volunteers come back reporting encounters with sentient beings, not vague feelings or abstract experiences, actual entities that communicate, that have messages, that seem to recognize the humans visiting their realm. These similarities of encounters with sentient beings who communicate with us and seem to have an urgent message to impart to us, Graham Hancock says. They want to know us, and they want us to know them. These aren't drug-induced hallucinations in the dismissive sense. The encounters follow patterns, contain information, and multiple people report similar beings and similar messages. The volunteers describe these experiences as more real than real, more vivid, more meaningful, more fundamentally true than ordinary waking consciousness. Now consider the protocols surrounding the Ark of the Covenant. Only certain people could approach it. They had to be in specific states of ritual purity. They followed precise procedures. Break these rules, and the Ark will kill you, instantly, mysteriously, without physical contact needed. What if these protocols weren't superstition but safety procedures? What if approaching the Ark required navigating consciousness states similar to those accessed through powerful psychedelics? The ancient priests might have used fasting, meditation, and ritual to achieve states of awareness that allowed them to safely interact with the Ark's field. The common thread here is consciousness as a technology. The Ark operated at the intersection of matter and mind. UFO encounters consistently involve altered perception, missing time, and states of awareness that seem to shift reality itself. Ancient temples with astronomical alignments served as consciousness-focusing devices, using architecture and celestial timing to facilitate specific mental states. Graham Hancock isn't claiming ancient priests were taking ayahuasca to approach the Ark. Still, he is suggesting that whatever technology or force the Ark represented, it interacted with human consciousness in ways our materialist science doesn't yet understand. and beings capable of navigating those consciousness realms, whether you call them angels, aliens, interdimensional entities, or spirit guides, would naturally be involved with an object like the Ark. Understanding how they maintain this knowledge across thousands of years requires looking at the organizations built specifically for that purpose. The Ancient Organization. Knowledge this profound doesn't survive thousands of years by accident. Graham Hancock points to evidence of what he calls secret societies, designed specifically to preserve information across millennia. Very clear in the case of ancient Egypt, whether you call them the followers of Horus or souls of Pi and Nekhen, these were secret societies which were entrusted with preserving information from what they call the first time, Hancock explains. These organizations didn't just memorize facts, they encoded knowledge into myths, stories, and monuments that could survive cultural collapse. The information embedded in these myths appears simple on the surface, but it contains sophisticated astronomical and mathematical data that only becomes apparent with deep analysis. One way that ideas can be maintained is to embed those ideas in wonderful stories. Call them myths if you like, Graham Hancock says. The storyteller no longer has to know that there is secret information embedded in that story. As long as the storyteller keeps on repeating the story, the secret information will continue to be passed down. The Ark of the Covenant fits this pattern perfectly. Its story passed through Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The details remained consistent. The specific dimensions, the materials, the danger of improper contact, the power to perform miracles. Generation after generation preserved this information, even when the Ark itself disappeared from history. But the Ark's story includes another crucial element: divine protection. According to tradition, the Ark couldn't be captured, couldn't be destroyed, couldn't be defiled. When the Philistines seized it, plagues struck them until they returned it. When it was finally placed in Solomon's temple, no enemy ever successfully stole it, despite multiple invasions of Jerusalem. This is where the UFO connection becomes impossible to ignore. If the Ark truly operated as a consciousness technology, if it truly served as a portal or communication device with non-human intelligence, then its protection wouldn't come from human guards alone. The same entities that shamans encounter in altered states, the same forces that manifest as UFO phenomena, the same intelligence that instructed ancient builders to create aligned temples. These forces would naturally protect their anchor point in human reality. This protective intelligence communicated with humanity through astronomical knowledge that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. The Precession Code. Graham Hancock's analysis of ancient monuments reveals something that mainstream archaeology struggles to explain: precise knowledge of astronomical precession encoded in structures over 12,000 years old. Precession is the slow wobble of Earth's axis, completing one full cycle in roughly 26,000 years. This wobble causes the apparent position of stars to shift gradually over centuries and millennia. Calculating precession requires detailed observation over multiple generations and sophisticated mathematical understanding. The ancient Egyptians have built an enormous statement on the ground that speaks to the date that we call 10,500 BC, astronomically speaks to that date, about 12,500 years ago, Hancock explains, referring to the Giza complex and its alignment with Orion's belt at that ancient date. Then there's Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to around 11,600 years ago. Pillar 43 in Enclosure D shows a scorpion, a vulture with outstretched wings, and what appears to be the sun. Graham Hancock and others interpret this as an astronomical diagram marking the summer solstice around 12,500 years ago. The fact is that the shape of that constellation is what is reflected on that pillar. And I want to tell you that it's not a coincidence. It marks out again that same date that the ancient Egyptians called the first time. This is the same date mentioned in Plato's account of Atlantis, 9,600 BC, or about 11,600 years ago. It corresponds to Meltwater Pulse 1b, a massive sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age. Graham Hancock sees this as evidence that survivors of a global cataclysm preserved their knowledge and deliberately marked the date of their civilization's destruction. The Ark of the Covenant enters this picture through timing. According to biblical chronology, Moses received instructions for building the ark around 1500 BC, but the instructions came from a divine source. The same type of divine instruction that told Gudea, Thutmose, and others to build astronomically aligned temples. What if the ark's design encoded similar information? What if its dimensions, materials, and construction contained astronomical and mathematical constants that we haven't fully decoded? Graham Hancock suggests that ancient knowledge wasn't random. It pointed toward specific dates, specific celestial alignments, specific moments when the veil between realities grows thin. The UFO phenomenon intensified dramatically after 1945, when the first nuclear weapons were detonated. Graham Hancock notes that UFOs consistently appear around nuclear facilities. If there is any oversight in this vast, mysterious universe that we're only just beginning to understand, if there is any oversight, that oversight might well take an interest in the possession of the power of gods by crazed teenagers. Perhaps the same oversight that protected the Ark, that guided ancient builders, that embedded precision knowledge into monuments. Perhaps that intelligence is watching our nuclear capabilities with the same concern it once showed for sacred objects like the Ark of the Covenant. This concern makes more sense when you understand that both the Ark and flood stories share a common origin in humanity's deepest memory. The flood connection. Graham Hancock refuses to separate the Atlantis tradition from the global flood mythology that appears in roughly 200 cultures worldwide. And the Ark of the Covenant story begins with another ark, Noah's, built to survive another catastrophic flood. The Atlantis tradition passed down to us by Plato, I regard it as part of that, Hancock says about the worldwide flood myths. It's one of the very few traditions of a global flood that destroys a former civilization that actually gives a date. That date, 9600 BC, aligns with geological evidence of massive flooding at the end of the Ice Age. Coastal civilizations would have been wiped out as sea levels rose hundreds of feet. The survivors would have carried their knowledge inland, preserving it through the secret societies Graham Hancock describes. The Ark of the Covenant, built thousands of years later, served a different purpose, but carried similar symbolism. It represented survival, preservation, direct connection with divine intelligence, and the continuation of sacred knowledge across catastrophe. Just as Noah's Ark preserved biological life, the Ark of the Covenant preserved spiritual and technological knowledge. But here's what makes the UFO connection critical. The flood myths consistently describe beings watching from above, angry gods, and divine judgment executed from the sky. Ancient texts describe flying craft, atmospheric phenomena, and non-human entities intervening in human affairs during these cataclysms. The Sumerian king list mentions rulers who reigned before the flood with impossibly long lifespans, suggesting the existence of different types of beings. The Watchers in Jewish tradition came down to interact with humans before the flood. Hindu texts describe vimanas, flying machines, used by gods during ancient conflicts. Graham Hancock doesn't claim these texts are literal historical records, but he insists they preserve memories of real events filtered through cultural interpretation. A global catastrophe around 11,600 years ago destroyed an advanced civilization. The survivors carried that civilization's knowledge forward. That knowledge included an understanding of consciousness technologies, astronomical cycles, and contact with non-human intelligence. The Ark of the Covenant represented the pinnacle of this preserved knowledge, a device built according to specifications that came from the same intelligence that ancient cultures described as gods, angels, or sky beings. Its power came from operating principles that our current science has only begun to grasp through quantum mechanics and consciousness research. And if that intelligence cared enough to preserve its communication device, its anchor point in human reality, through thousands of years of human chaos, it would use whatever means necessary. Protection that appeared technological, protection that appeared supernatural, protection that witnesses in modern times call UFOs. This protective interest becomes even more urgent when humanity develops technology that threatens the dimensional fabric itself. The nuclear question. Investigative journalist Robert Hastings documented hundreds of incidents where UFOs appeared at nuclear facilities. These weren't distant sightings. UFOs hovered over missile silos, shut down weapon systems, and in some cases appeared to deactivate nuclear warheads. Graham Hancock sees this as profoundly significant. We're so stupid and so irresponsible that we'll just do it to ourselves, he says about humanity's nuclear arsenal. We don't need that gigantic solar outburst, or we don't need to be hit by multiple pieces of a disintegrating comet. We'll just do it to ourselves. The connection to the Ark becomes clear through the radiation question. Graham Hancock explored the presence of radioactive materials at ancient sites associated with curses and spiritual power. The Ark itself was said to kill those who touched it improperly, a description that sounds remarkably like radiation poisoning. You can think of the Ark of the Covenant as maybe a product of the same thing, Hancock says about the uranium and radiation found at spiritually significant locations. Modern physics understands that nuclear reactions manipulate matter at its most fundamental level, literally breaking apart the bonds that hold atoms together. This releases enormous energy, but also creates dimensional distortions that quantum mechanics can measure. Some theoretical physicists suggest nuclear detonations might create temporary breaches between parallel dimensions. If the Ark operated using similar principles, manipulating matter and energy at quantum levels to facilitate interdimensional communication, then nuclear weapons would represent a primitive, dangerous version of the same technology. Entities concerned about the Ark's function would naturally be concerned about humanity developing weapons that could damage the dimensional fabric the Ark was designed to navigate. This explains the UFO presence at nuclear sites, not because aliens fear our weapons, but because nuclear detonations interfere with the very structure of reality that consciousness technologies like the Ark depend on. The oversight Graham Hancock mentions isn't necessarily about protecting humanity from itself. It's about protecting the functionality of portals and communication channels that took thousands of years to establish. Consciousness elevation. When Graham Hancock talks about humanity's survival, he doesn't focus on technology or politics. He focuses on consciousness. I think the only hope is an elevation of consciousness, he says, and that has to be across a wide range of the population. This ties everything together. The Ark of the Covenant wasn't given to humanity as a weapon or a magic box. It was given as a teaching device, a reminder that reality extends far beyond physical matter, that consciousness connects us to intelligences vast and ancient, that our choices matter on scales we can barely comprehend. The UFO phenomenon serves a similar function. It's not about proving aliens exist or don't exist. It's about expanding human consciousness to accept that we're not alone, not the center of creation, not the pinnacle of intelligence. Every authentic UFO encounter leaves witnesses transformed, questioning their assumptions about reality, opening to possibilities they previously dismissed. Graham Hancock's work with ayahuasca revealed the same pattern. A lot of people come out of these experiences saying they are more real than real. He explains about extended DMT experiences. The entities encountered in these states consistently deliver messages about consciousness evolution, about humanity's potential, about the urgent need to wake up. In this framework, the Ark of the Covenant was an earlier version of the same message delivery system. It demonstrated power beyond human understanding, enforced protocols that required conscious discipline, and served as a focal point for connection with higher intelligence. Those who approached it properly, in the right state of consciousness, with the right preparation, following the right procedures, could access guidance and knowledge unavailable through normal awareness. The UFO phenomenon operates similarly. Witnesses who remain open, who can process the experience without psychological breakdown, often report receiving information, experiencing consciousness expansion, and feeling called to change their lives in fundamental ways. They want to know us, and they want us to know them, Graham Hancock says about the entities encountered in altered states. The same appears to be true of whatever intelligence manifests through UFO phenomena, and perhaps the same was true for whatever presence inhabited or protected the Ark of the Covenant. The missing answer. The Ark of the Covenant disappeared from history around 587 BC, when Babylon destroyed Solomon's temple. Various traditions claim it was hidden, buried, taken to Ethiopia, or destroyed. But no credible evidence exists for any of these theories. Graham Hancock explored this mystery extensively. His research led him to radiation signatures, consciousness technologies, and patterns of divine protection that span cultures and millennia. But the Ark's physical location remains unknown, unless it doesn't need to be found. If the Ark truly operated as a consciousness technology, if it served as an anchor point for interdimensional communication, then its physical location might be irrelevant. The same intelligence that manifests through UFO encounters, that shamans contact through altered states, that guided ancient builders, that intelligence doesn't depend on a single physical object to maintain its connection with humanity. The Ark served its purpose. It preserved knowledge through the collapse of ancient civilizations. It provided a focal point for spiritual practice and the discipline of consciousness. It demonstrated that reality extends beyond the physical, that contact with non-human intelligence is real, and that proper protocols and understanding can facilitate safe interaction with these forces. Now, with nuclear weapons and quantum physics, with ayahuasca research and UFO disclosure, with archaeological discoveries that keep pushing civilization back further in time, humanity is being prepared for direct understanding of what the Ark represented symbolically. Graham Hancock sees the acceleration clearly. Ancient wisdom returns through multiple channels. Scientists discover what shamans always knew. UFO encounters increase in frequency and credibility. The veil between realities grows thinner. Or perhaps human consciousness finally develops enough to perceive what was always there. The shocking UFO connection to the Ark of the Covenant isn't that aliens built it or protected it. It's the same intelligence, the same technology, the same understanding that produced the Ark, and it continues to interact with humanity through forms appropriate to each era. Bronze Age priests called it the presence of God. Medieval mystics called it angels. Modern witnesses call it UFOs. The underlying reality remains constant. We're not alone, never have been, and certain objects, places, and practices facilitate contact with intelligences beyond our ordinary perception. What do you think happened to the Ark of the Covenant? And if consciousness technologies like Graham Hancock describes are real, what should humanity do with that knowledge? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.